Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Five for Breakfast. We're now on our 17th episode of 2025. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco, the platinum sponsor of Five for Breakfast. So NTIA issued a blanket waiver last night to grant a 90-day extension to all states and territories for filing their final proposals. The extensions provided so states have time to revise their final proposal once NTIA releases the anticipated changes to the program. While the Fiber Broadband Association supports the administration's efforts to streamline and accelerate the BEAD program by stripping out some burdensome bureaucratic requirements, it's not clear to us how delaying BEAD for another 3 months after they've already been holding up states that would have shovels in the ground 3 months ago is accelerating the program. State broadband offices have been working their asses off for the past 3 to 4 years, and they know their eligible locations, the topologies, and the families that stand to benefit from this broadband investment better than anyone. Washington needs to let the states decide on what's best for their communities. At the FCC, CTIA, the Wireless Association, filed a petition for rulemaking asking the commission to revise the agency's National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA rules. The FCC is seeking public comment on that petition, with the first round comments due on Wednesday, April 30th. The Fiber Broadband Association will be filing comments in response to petitioners' recommendations, but we believe will bring benefit to our members. Congress is still in recess this week, and will return to Washington next week. The reconciliation markups are expected to begin next week. Congressional leadership is aiming to use the budget reconciliation process to advance key priorities. Majority is targeting the completion of the reconciliation package by Memorial Day, though the timelines might remain uncertain. As the Fiber Broadband Association works its way around North America, so far our regional Fiber Connect workshops in San Antonio, Texas, and Philadelphia have been sold out, and our annual Fiber Connect Conference 2025, June 1st to 4th, is on track for another attendance record. After Nashville, we'll be in Anchorage in July, Toronto in August, Spokane in September, Scottsdale in October, Kansas City in November, and then we'll finish the year with our premier member meeting in Palm Springs, December 8th and 9th. That brings us to today's Five for Breakfast session. Our guest is Frederick, the Chief Connectivity Officer at Michigan High-Speed Internet Office, to discuss From Access to Impact, a major push to close the digital divide across Michigan. But before I introduce today's guest, I'd like to introduce David Norris from team's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you everybody for joining us today. We appreciate it. Before I go over a few logistics, we'd just like to once again thank our platinum sponsor, Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco. Now, please keep in mind, as participants, you are in listen-only mode today. However, we do want to hear from you. To ask your questions, you can type them into the question box, which is located in the lower left-hand side of your screen. And we'll be hosting a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today, so we'd love to get to your questions. This presentation is also being recorded and will be available on FBA's website within 24 to 48 hours. And you can find that recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. Finally, at the conclusion of today's presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. Please take a moment to respond. We really appreciate your input. And with that, I will hand things back over to Gary to get us started. Gary?
Thanks, Dave, and good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week on Five for Breakfast, our guest was Brian Worthen, the CEO of Visionary Broadband, who discussed Powering Progress, a game-changing expansion for Canyon City's growth and success. Brian discussed how Visionary has been able to bring 1 gigabit symmetric broadband service to hard-to-reach rural areas in Wyoming, Colorado, and Montana, and New Mexico, all for about $60 a month. So gigabit symmetric, $60 a month. Not so bad. So if you missed last week's session, you can go to our website and watch the replay. Today on Five for Breakfast, our guest is Frederick, the Chief Connectivity Officer for Michigan High-Speed Internet Office, to discuss From Access to Impact, a major push to close the digital divide across Michigan. Eric serves as the state of Michigan's first Chief Connectivity Officer. In this role, he leads the Michigan High-Speed Internet Office, MIHI, I guess that's what you would call it, MIHI, with the goal of achieving universal broadband access, creating a more digital, equitable state. And for more than a decade, Eric has been a steadfast advocate and resource for expanding broadband in Michigan, and now oversees MIHI's $1.8 billion in funds to close Michigan's digital divide. Eric also serves as a designee for Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist II as the chair of the FCC's Intergovernmental Advisory Committee. With all that, welcome, Eric. And for our audience, please type in your questions as we go, and we'll work those into discussion. So I will turn things over to Eric.
All right. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me here. I really enjoy talking about this topic and really getting to talk about Michigan specifically and how we are closing that digital divide. I always like to start off by introducing our office. So like you said in my intro there, I've been working on broadband in the state for quite some time now, but our office is relatively new. And I think there's other states that are in that same position. BEAD really sparked the need to spin up state broadband offices across the country. Some have been in existence, some hadn't. Michigan is one of those where we didn't have that single point of contact within state government for a very long time. So back right in the middle of COVID in June of 2021, Governor Whitmer created the Michigan High-Speed Internet Office, and MIHI is right. That is that's our acronym, and decided to create this office by executive directive because obviously COVID brought the internet connectivity right to the forefront of everybody's mind, and so we were created back in June of 2021, but we were not authorized for funding and staffing by the legislature until April of 2022. And then I joined the state of Michigan to lead the office in July of 2022. So again, while that sounds like 3 years ago, that 3 years has gone incredibly fast with the passage of the Infrastructure Act, the creation of the BEAD program, the Digital Equity Act, and all the other programs that have come along to solve this challenge that we're up against. So in that time, we've expanded our office. This is my team. We have two verticals in our office. We have a digital equity team and we have an infrastructure and data team. But we want to make sure that both sides are talking to each other. We talk about this sometimes with supply and demand, right? Infrastructure is the supply, digital equity is the demand, and we have to make sure we're balancing those two things as we work to close that digital divide. We know that just because the infrastructure is there doesn't mean folks are able to use it and leverage it to improve their quality of life. And so we need to make sure we're addressing digital equity and inclusion at the same time. And so that's why we set up the office in this way. But as a new office, things have changed over time, and we've had to respond to changes in federal direction, changes in state direction. But this is the team that we've got to really help us with this challenge and make sure that we are addressing all of the needs of the state and implementing our programs as quickly as we possibly can to make sure that we are closing that digital divide. We are located within the Prosperity Division of the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. It's a very good spot for us to be. Other states are in economic development, for example, or within their Public Utility Commission or elsewhere, or even in their governor's office. But us being with the Labor and Economic Opportunity is a great chance for us to sit next to a lot of other sister offices that do adjacent work. So we sit next to Workforce. We sit right next to MyLeap, which works on education. So there's lots of different opportunities for us to really collaborate with other state agencies. And as a facilitator of the expansion of a technology that enables so many other activities within state government, that's a really good spot for us to be. So let's go on to that next slide. I come from the nonprofit world. So before joining the state of Michigan, I worked for 12 years at Connected Nation, the nonprofit that was working to expand broadband across the country. And I wanted to bring that mission-driven focus from the nonprofit world to state government. And so our mission at MIHI is to create a more digitally equitable state where everyone can leverage technology to improve their quality of life. That is the mission that our staff looks to. It's the mission that we talk about every single time we go out and do a presentation. If there's anybody on this on our presentation today that's ever seen me do a presentation before, that mission is always the very first thing we talk about. So in order to achieve that mission, we really need to do two things. One is to ensure the universal availability of broadband to every home, business, institution, and community across our state. It has to be available. And right now we're at about 92%. And of course, the BEAD program and other federal efforts and state efforts to get that to 100% are the ones that are working to fill in that last 8% or so in Michigan. And then on top of that, we also want to make sure that homes are able to adopt that connection once it's there. And so we want to shoot for having 95% of households adopting a permanent broadband connection at home, and we're about 72% right there. So again, to reflect our goals in our Office of Supply and Demand, Infrastructure, Digital Equity. We also have those two goals that address those things too, because again, we know that without digital equity and inclusion, those infrastructure investments and networks won't be used. And so we want to have goals that reflect being able to achieve that mission. Another thing that I wanted to bring to the office were some guiding principles. Because we were brand new, we had an opportunity to really set the groundwork for how we want to do our work and implement our programs. And so these 6 words really are the way that we go about our work with our staff. So we want to be creative, efficient, and transparent. BEAD is going to require us to be efficient with our dollars so that we can make sure that we can get to every location in the state. And that also requires investing in creative solutions. So making sure that every tool at our disposal is available to implement those programs and those funds. And we want to be transparent when we do it and make sure that we are clear in the program rules and the results and how we're implementing that program and how we're monitoring our grantees once we get to that point. In order to develop our plans, we've had to be collaborative. So talking to a wide variety of stakeholders across Michigan is one of the things that we wanted to do. We set out on a 43-stop listening tour when we were creating our BEAD 5-year action plan and our digital equity plan. And we went to every corner of the state to listen. We wanted to listen first and plan second. And so we can't do that without collaboration. And of course, we have to be adaptable. And Gary, as you said it when we stepped off today, that the BEAD rules could be changing. So we have to be adaptable to those changes and new directions that come. And I want to make sure my staff is doing that as well. And then finally, we want to be intentional about every bit of our work that it then achieves those goals and ladders up to our mission. And so again, with this strong foundation, I think we were able to establish an office and a culture that really looks to leverage these federal programs, these once-in-a-generation opportunities that we have. We can go on to the next one. This is a touch redundant with our mission in that we're trying to create a digitally equitable state, but this is something I also like to remind our staff about, is that our work is not about the technology, it's about people, right? We want to enable people to improve their quality of life using this technology. And this list that you see here comes from a list that we have in our office that we keep internally and keep adding to as we go about our work. But it reminds us of who we're doing this work for. The very first one that we put on this list was for every student that had to sit outside a library or McDonald's to access Wi-Fi to complete their schoolwork during the pandemic. That's who we're doing this work for. Every community that wants to broaden their engagement with the public. That's who we do this work for. Every person that gets snowed in and wants to still work or learn remotely. That happens a lot in northern Michigan. That's who we do this work for. And that list goes on and on and on. I believe that our list is about 8 or 9 pages now in the state about who we're doing this work for. And so every time we think of a new example or run into somebody that we've talked to or had an engagement with a constituent, we add to this list to make sure that we are constantly reminded that our work is not necessarily about the technology, it's about the people and the activities that they can leverage this technology for to improve their quality of life. I'll go on to that next one. So this is my last slide, but this is the slide that keeps me up at night, right? Every red dot on this map, and there's 4.1 million dots on this map, every red dot is a BEAD eligible location. We have BEAD eligible locations in every one of our 83 counties across the state, and there's 248,253 of them on this map. These are all the locations that we have to get to and include a solution for in our final proposal for the BEAD program. As you well know, and as your audience very well knows, BEAD is designed to fill in the cracks, right? It's fill in the gaps between all these other federal programs and state programs that have come before it and have not achieved universal availability. BEAD has to fill that in. And so all the blue dots in this map are the locations that are getting connected via other programs that I don't necessarily have control over, but I need to be successful so that we can get to universal availability. So we watch those programs very closely. Some of them are funded by our Robin program, which is our capital projects funded program that's getting to about 72,000 locations across the state. But the remainder are RDOF, USDA Reconnect, and Enhanced ACAM, and the other programs that are out there as well. So we need to make sure that those programs are successful so that we can achieve that goal of universal availability. But BEAD, of course, is where we have the most control about getting those connections out here. So you can see the scattered pattern. I don't think this is different than many other states for our BEAD locations across Michigan. And we've got some very natural clustering, but of course, across our Upper Peninsula, we have lots and lots of very sparsely populated areas that have BEAD eligible locations. You can see there's about, I think there's 8 or 9 BSLs on Isle Royal National Park there in the middle of Lake Superior. So we've got some challenges that we need to solve with the BEAD program. And where we're at right now in Michigan, we are in the thick of reviewing, scoring, and deconflicting 392 applications that we received in our first grant round for BEAD. We received applications from 32 applicants that proposed to serve 194,000 of our BEAD eligible locations. So I'm very happy with the response that we got in Michigan. I should say that our first BEAD round was fiber only. So those are all priority projects that we received for the BEAD program, again, to serve 194,000 of our 248,000 BEAD eligible locations. So a vast majority of those were included in projects in round one. And like I said, we are in the thick of reviewing, scoring, and deconflicting those overlapping projects. So it's a very busy time for us as we go about this process of, again, moving as quickly as we can to get funds out the door, get shovels in the ground, get projects up and running. And I was very encouraged by the response that we got in round one to our priority project round. So yeah, I'm more than happy to take any questions you might have and talk about anything that we've got going on here in the state.
Well, Eric, I love that you like to remind your team that this is about people and the struggles that people have and what you're doing, and also your focus on adoption. It's not just getting people connected, but making sure they're able to benefit from the broadband you're deploying. You're Eagle Scout, and you guess have spent a lot of your life focused on leading scouting and so forth. So I suspect that has enabled you to get out to the UP and see some remote areas that you would. I mean, I know you're on your listening tour, but it sounds like you might have been out in the canoe and out really visiting some of these remote areas. Is that the case?
It was. So last July, we took our scout troop on a backpacking trip to Isle Royal. And while I was there, I happened to have a chance to talk to the IT administrator for the National Park Service on the island. So it was very interesting to talk about their needs. I mean, there's a lot of safety issues, right? We're talking about one of the most remote national parks in the country. And making sure that folks, if there is an emergency situation, they can get connected. I was very surprised to see Wi-Fi at the visitor center in Isle Royal. It was a very nice thing to see, and so that got me curious. And I talked to the IT director up there. We spent a couple hours chatting about the service that they currently have and some of their continuing needs. But yeah, I did my undergrad work at Northern Michigan University in the UP. So I consider myself a little bit of a Youper, even though I grew up in the Lower Peninsula. But I'm familiar with the rural nature of Northern Michigan and the unique challenges that it presents, not only from a sparsely populated area, but also the terrain, the vegetation that can cause issues with various technologies. It's a beautiful and wonderful state to live in. But when we start investing in infrastructure and building that infrastructure, we're going to run into challenges. And other states have similar challenges too. I like to think we're a little unique with our two peninsulas. We have lots of water in Michigan that we need to build around. And so BEAD is going to have some particular challenges for those parts of the state, but we're committed to making sure we're investing in that technology that solves not only their connectivity challenges for tomorrow, but also 30 years from now. And so making sure that we know where these challenge points are and how to, and can really stave off any of those issues ahead of time, I think is going to be one key component of our BEAD program to make sure, again, we know our state, we know it well, and working with those stakeholders and folks to head off any of those barriers that we might come up against. So
obviously, your state is very unique, and the topology is different. You have, as you mentioned, a lot of waterways, a lot of. It's not. You can go to different parts of the state and it'll be completely different than other parts of the state. So, what would you say that the biggest challenge that you're facing as to try to get all these places? I mean, think about from a middle mile network and so forth.
Yeah, so I mean, we're very lucky that we have a fairly robust middle mile community in Michigan, with not only the all of our private sector friends in the middle mile community, but also Merit Network, our research and education network in the state, has a very robust middle mile network throughout Michigan that is going to be helpful for BEAD. We also had a recipient of the NTIA's Middle Mile Grant Program in the state, building fiber in a very unique way. Like I said, we have a lot of water, but part of that project is building some new connectivity between the Lower Peninsula and the Upper Peninsula on the bottom of Lake Michigan via Beaver Island. So talk about a very unique project and solving a unique challenge that we have in the state in making sure that we have middle mile capacity to support all these last mile connections that are going to be built with BEAD. I think that's going to be a unique challenge, but we've had a community that's recognized that challenge for a long time and has been stepping up to the plate to solve that particularly unique challenge. One of the other things that we've done at MIHI is started to create relationships with other state agencies that oversee permitting and easements in some of our rural parts of the state. So for example, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, we've created a partnership with our DNR to help make sure that they understand the scale of what's coming for BEAD and then have the capacity to process any right-of-way or easement permits that'll need to be processed across state managed lands. We have lots of state forest. And so we want to make sure that that those processes are in place for a reason and that they have the capacity to move BEAD funded projects through their process efficiently so that we can meet those the deadlines of the program itself. And so building relationships, and that's just one example with DNR, but building relationships with our counties and heading off and making sure that they have capacity for addressing road commission right-of-way permits or drain commission permits or what have you, working with our railroads and building those relationships. So one of the key staff in our office is our permitting specialist, who is really tasked with playing air traffic control and building these relationships so that when we get to the point of having BEAD subgrantees, we know exactly who to go to and preparing them for what's coming with the program. So that's one way that we're working to navigate some of these challenges that we foresee coming with the BEAD program.
Well, I got a lot of audience questions, so I don't know what you can say about this, but when do you think MIHI will make a decision about round one of the BEAD applications?
Yeah, so we really want to make announcements as soon as we can. Obviously, we are hampered by the rules of the current NTIA guidance and final proposal about when we can make those announcements. But we're moving as quickly as we can through reviewing and scoring and deconfliction. But we should start to be able to have conversations with those applicants here within the next month or so. And again, delivering the results of that deconfliction and scoring and talking about negotiation of grant agreements and so on. So we're very excited that actually we're going to be publishing our draft grant agreement here, if not today, by the end of this week, for everyone to provide comment on. We want to know what we got right, what needs to be fixed, and what barriers there'll be in that, so that again, once we get to that stage, it'll be a lot easier to move quickly.
Another question is, are the RDOF defaults, those locations included in BEAD?
That's right. So as you might remember, so Michigan had some RDOF default issues late last year. So we actually wanted to start subgrantee selection in October of last year. But about 2 weeks before we anticipated getting approval of our BEAD eligible locations, we got word that there were defaults coming. So we paused to make sure that we could pick up any of those eligible locations out of those defaults. So I believe there were about 60,000 plus RDOF locations defaulted on at the end of last year. Again, it took 3 months to get that information, which is why we had to wait till January to start subgrantee selection. But once we get it, there are about 60,000 plus locations included, and then about 38,000 of those ended up being BEAD eligible. Some of them had been built to by other providers, in their intervening time between RDOF and now. For whatever other reasons, they were connected or not BEAD eligible, but again, about 38,000 of those. So because of those defaults, we actually now have the third highest BEAD eligible location count among all the states. So it's Texas, California, and then Michigan with the fourth highest allocation. So we've got some work to do, but we wanted to pause our program to make sure that we could capture all of those defaults and make sure that there is a commitment to get those locations connected.
So when the allocation of 1.6 billion was predicated on a little over 400,000 locations, you've now whittled that down to 250,000. Do you believe that you'll have non-deployment funds that you can use for workforce development and more middle mile, or what do you see?
I'd like to think so. We've already committed a good chunk of our BEAD funds to workforce development, but there's definitely a push from this administration and Congress. We've seen it with the Speed to BEAD Act. There was a specific call out for more workforce development in the proposed changes to the BEAD Act. So we're definitely would love to address more workforce. I mean, there's not only workforce for BEAD, but workforce in general to leverage these networks and make sure that we've got the skilled workforce we need to do whatever it is these networks enable businesses to do in the state. So I definitely think there's an opportunity for non-deployment in Michigan. The scale of that, we just don't know. But we know that the deployment is first in the first priority for BEAD. But obviously, there's lots of opportunity here to make sure that those networks get leveraged. And like you said, middle mile could be, supported via non-deployment funds, possibly 5G expansion, multi-dwelling unit Wi-Fi. I mean, you name it. There's lots of different opportunities here to make sure that we are truly connecting everyone in the state.
So you mentioned your goal of 95% adoption, and you're at 72% today, which is great. What programs have been really effective on adoption?
So Michigan's participation in ACP was big. I believe the Detroit metro area was consistently had the highest rate of participation in ACP of any metro area in the country. And then the rest of the state wasn't too bad either. And so we really, really pushed the ACP program in Michigan because we know affordability is a challenge for our most vulnerable citizens and households. It was very unfortunate when that program went away, and there has been no successor. But we know that affordability is a challenge for some of our most vulnerable citizens and households. But I would still count ACP as a success for sure. One of the other things that we're doing is through the Digital Equity Act and our Digital Equity Capacity Grant Program is funding and placing digital navigators regionally across the state. The Detroit area and the city of Detroit has been doing great work in digital inclusion for a long time now, but a lot of the other parts of the state just haven't had that resource, right? So we, with our Digital Equity Capacity Grant Program, have funded what's called our Mitten network of digital navigators and have placed those in regional entities across Michigan to really be that resource and work with other entities that are closer to the ground, their schools, our libraries, our nonprofit organizations, to really, again, bring those resources and organize those resources locally and regionally across Michigan so that, again, once the infrastructure is built, we have a system in place to help support the digital inclusion of those folks that are newly connected and make sure that they can leverage those technologies.
Well, Eric, we really appreciate all the hard work that you and your team are putting in to make sure that everybody in Michigan gets not only connected, but is able to leverage the benefits that come from having high speed. Thank you guys for that great work. And I hope everybody comes and joins us next Wednesday. We'll have Jamie Linderman from OBM. She's going to discuss her latest research on the effects of the 2025 U.S. tariffs on the fiber to the home equipment landscape. So if you're interested in how tariffs are impacting fiber to home equipment, you're not going to want to miss this session. Thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Eric. And look forward to seeing you in Nashville and beginning of June.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.